Welcome to The Rest is Giant Robots, a conversation through the careers of writer Simon Furman and artist Andrew Wildman. Recollections and revelations about the highs and the lows as creatives in comics, books, games, film and TV.
Okay, right. So whenever you're ready, shall we do our usual uh, just introductions and go from there?
Yeah. Should we do it? Should we change it up a bit? So I'll do mine first and then you do yours, or
Sounds good. Yep.
and then you can pick up and start, carrying on with the other thing. Hi, so welcome to episode five.
Five, yeah.
Got five of these things. Yes, so my name's Andrew Wildman, artist on comics, TV, film, and lots of other bits and pieces.
And my name's Simon Furman. I'm the writer on Transformers and many other things, some of which we're hopefully going to talk about today. And yeah, that was just us showing you that we can mix it up a bit. We don't always start the same way.
We probably will from now on, though. Just we'll revert to type. Yeah.
Yeah. But we'll try and do something different from time to time, just so you
Yeah.
don't think you're listening to the same episode.
Yeah, fair enough.
So where were we? Last time we kind of digressed a bit, I guess, into conventions and the whole history of not just Transformers conventions, but comic conventions that we've attended and how much they've changed. So I guess we want to sort of rewind a little bit to the end of episode 3, where I'd kind of started my tenure at Marvel US working on Transformers, and we were leading up to issue 69 when you joined. But I thought before we get to that, we're going to be talking, I guess, about some of the other things as well as Transformers we've worked on for Marvel. But
Yeah.
but before all that, there was Marvel UK's little burst of US format publishing that we slightly skipped over.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and that lasted for a while. There was quite a lot, but obviously there was the original ones that kicked off some really interesting stuff, which obviously you're going to tell her because it was nothing to do with me, but it was very, very, very much to do with you. But yes, and the kind of ripples from those couple of little projects reached quite far, didn't they?
Yeah, absolutely did. And, of course, it ends up there is a connection to Transformers in here as well, which we'll get to. But yeah, this was pretty much Richard Starking's initiative. We'd had visitations, as I think we've spoken about already, from editor-in-chiefs at Marvel US. We'd had Jim Shooter over, we'd had Tom DeFalco over, and there was a sort of feeling that while we were doing good work on the licensed product, could we be doing something more original Marvel UK? Marvel UK had Captain Britain, which had already, I think Captain Britain Monthly had finished by then. So I don't know whether there was much original work coming out of Marvel at that point. It was all licensed. And Richard Starkings, and I'm pretty sure Jenny O'Connor, who was the sort of the next stage up editor, and Robert, were talking about, well, maybe we should be doing our own titles, establishing a few of our own IPs rather than just, licensed or existing Marvel characters. And the first one out of the sort of hatch, I guess, was Dragon's Claws, which came out of, strangely, Richard just asking Jeff Senior to do some free-form examples of something sci-fi or fantasy, and he did he just did a page of drawings of a character, one of which was this crouching figure with a gun behind a wall and a sort of battle type helmet on. and that was the slightly the genesis of Dragon's Claws, or Dragon's Teeth, as it was meant to be.
Uh-huh.
And that was a kind of strange thing, and I was delighted, doing US format comic series that was going to be sold in America as well was thrilling. It was wow. These are proper comics, if you like. And
Yeah. Proper comics in color and the right size and all that kind of stuff that we'd grown up with.
yeah.
So just so that initial sketches then that Jeff did, so he was just given carte blanche to do whatever he wanted. So given the time period here, so what would he be riffing off of? Probably Rogue Trooper, bit
Yeah,
of kind of what else was around at the time, do you think would have been influences on Jeff?
yeah, certainly. I mean, I know, subsequently he was a big fan of Conan and things like that. So we might have veered towards fantasy. And I'm pretty sure on those samples there was a big snake-like creature that could have come out of a
Uh,
Conan story. But
okay.
but yeah, I'm sure he'd done work for 2000, little bits and pieces, probably Future Shocks. He'd done a lot of work for it was not Star Lord, but there was a little digest size sci-fi series around that time.
Mm,
It's not Star Lord, that was something else. Anyway, I will come up with what that was, but he'd done a lot of sci-fi stuff for that. And I think so, I think he was probably channeling that as much as anything, drawing
right.
a sci-fi combat guy. And it just very much, I think, struck Richard and all of us as the way to go, not sort of
Yeah.
fantasy, but more, that 2000 AD style,
Yeah. And so very, very definitely not Marvel superhero style.
no. I mean, I think that
That's
was that was a
interesting.
slightly conscious decision not to try and we didn't want to be competing with Marvel US.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we had Captain Britain, and there was that superhero-y side to Marvel. There was Night Raven and a few other strips, but sci-fi sort of felt like the way to go, a little more, that dystopian, edgy, slightly dark humor that
Yeah.
2000 AD did.
Which was very much the kind of zeitgeist as well because of the whole kind of aliens thing that had made such an impact um, on the genre anyway. I was thought because after Star Wars, which was just basically space western, prior to that 2001, which was just sort of NASA on speed.
Yeah.
But the kind of horror sci-fi thing, I think caught a lot of people's imagination. Blade Runner, all that kind of thing. So you can, and it was very much a European style rather than American. So yeah, you could see how that would kind of filter into what kind of comics people would want to do, and certainly did into 2000 AD anyway, didn't it?
Yeah. And I think all the three series that Marvel kicked off with in that format were very much, let's stick with sci-fi. Let's stick with,
Yeah.
that slightly, off-kilter British humor, or, approach to comics storytelling.
Mm.
And, I was more or less just sent off to come up with a framework based on one illustration, which was kind of strange.
Yeah.
But in a way, that was great. It meant I could just draw on all my own influences. So, I was heavily influenced by, we may have talked about this already, but 70s sci-fi movies. I thought the 70s was a great time for sci-fi, not just Alien, but you had I was very impressed with a film called Rollerball, which was a sort of
Oh yeah,
futuristic
yeah,
sport thing, and that came
yeah.
into play. And Charlton Heston seemed to be in every sci-fi film of the 60s. There was Soylent Green, there was Planet of the Apes. I think he did a version of that Last Man on Earth called the Omega Man.
Yeah.
And and I just loved all this slightly dystopian sci-fi of the time. And I think that all played in. And, Rollerball particularly, the whole conceit of Rollerball was that there was this sort of extremely ultra violent sport, like
Mm,
it was like a roller derby, but with spiked knuckles and things and motorbike
mm,
crashes. James Caan was in it, and
that's right.
the actual film, you know, it has it's the games you watch it for, and I remember finding it very visceral and exciting and energetic, and I thought, I wonder if I can channel something of that into Dragon's Teeth, and
Mm,
Dragon's Teeth so called because there was that mythological thing of sowing dragon's teeth, and warriors would rise up, from new warriors would arise from the dragon's teeth. And it was going,
wow, I've not heard that.
yeah,
Not
yeah,
heard that legend.
yeah, no.
Wow.
I think it's even in one of the Ray Harryhausen movies. It's one of those old Greek myth things.
Yeah, yeah,
And
okay.
anyway, that was the genesis of the title. Rollerball was my slightly, well, okay, it's a futuristic, very violent game that keeps the masses happy.
Mm,
And then, from there, I just sort of spun it out. We put in a definite, quite early eco theme into it that the world has been somewhat used and abused by the year, weirdly, 8162. I don't know who came up with such a far future, but might have been Richard. And yeah, from there we just sort of spun out this, you know, sci-fi opus that we thought was going to run and run. Of course, it didn't, but we did do our 10 issues of that. And at the time, we'd moved Death's Head out of Transformers.
mm,
We'd already done a little sort of side U-turn to get him a Marvel copyright, and now we wanted to move him out of Transformers, which we did, of all things, via Doctor Who Monthly.
yeah.
He was in a little crossover strip where he meets the seventh Doctor, I want to say, sixth Doctor, and and um, and gets shrunk to human size and ends up in Dragon's Claws issue 5.
So that, I mean, that is odd though, isn't it? That is odd to kind of extract him from Transformers via Doctor Who to Dragon's Teeth. It's like, wow, that's a roundabout route. Was that purely for some kind of legal reasons or
uh, it kind of just worked with what we had, to get him from one to the other. It felt like they needed something interim, and
mm,
the whole Doctor Who thing was that he jumped through some kind of time gate at the end of his Transformers story, and we just had him collide with the TARDIS, and the Doctor had this gadget he'd acquired from his nemesis, the Master, called the tissue decompression eliminator or something. Anyway, it shrunk things.
oh yeah, one of those. Yeah, I got one
Yes.
of those somewhere.
Yeah. Anyway, that was the perfect, tool we needed to get Death's Head down to human size and
Yeah,
dump him in the year 8162 so he could meet Dragon's Claws and
yeah.
spin off from that into his own title. So it was somewhat tortuous.
And
But
I mean, with all those strange, tortuous, tenuous connections, I mean, are there rights complications? The fact that their set appeared in Doctor Who, does the BBC have any claim to anything?
I think the only problem is now the crossovers with the Doctor can't be reprinted by Marvel
All
because they
right.
don't have the license. So I think
Yeah.
those stories have to be left out of collections at the moment, which is a shame, but
Yeah.
not catastrophic. Um, yeah, so I think that's the only sort of problem that you know at the time Marvel UK had you know the Transformers license, the Doctor Who license, and then created their own titles. So there wasn't
Hmm.
an issue. But yeah, these days, I wonder if the BBC would be so happy with us bouncing characters of our own through the Doctor Who's sort of license material. It was a simpler
Yeah.
time.
Yes, it certainly was.
I think that should
Yeah.
I think that should be our mantra for this whole series. It was a simpler
It was a
time.
simpler time. Yeah. Yeah.
Anyways,
Not necessarily for the better.
no, no, maybe not. So yeah, Dragon's Claws turned into a Death's Head monthly series. So for a while we had those two running concurrently, and meanwhile John Carnell and Andy Lanning had come up with Sleaze Brothers. They're very
Mm,
sci-fi Blues Brothers inspired bit of sort of madness that they did so well.
mm,
It was really sort of, very different beast to Dragon's Claws or Death's Head. Uh,
mm.
but
Very.
wonderful. It was great that there seemed to be this flurry of original IP creativeness going on,
Mm.
and sadly, it was a bit short-lived.
So just for sort of clarity, what year was Dragon's Teeth, um, and then Sleaze Brothers?
I think it's pretty much. I'm pretty sure that Dragon's Teeth Claws was
Mm,
88 into 89. Death's Head was largely 89, maybe tipped slightly into 1990, and Sleaze Brothers was somewhere around that time
mm.
in the
And
mix.
when did Dragon's Teeth become Dragon's Claws, and why?
Yeah, that was a kind of strange one. Dragon's Teeth made so much more sense. The logo had Richard had drawn the logo and it had teeth in it. So, we were all,
Mm,
and I think the first three issues were drawn, lettered, colored as Dragon's Teeth. I think I still have them somewhere as
mm,
Dragon's Teeth. It's the logo. They're referred to as Dragon's Teeth throughout. And then out of nowhere, we were contacted, or Richard or Marvel UK as a whole were contacted by a small press American comic called Dragon's Teeth, which we'd never
oh,
even heard about. And in the end, I think only two issues of it ever came out, but they objected to us using the name. And
hmm,
rather than risk a battle or some kind of legal challenge, it was all changed last minute to Dragon's Claws, and a vast amount of relettering and relogoing and every all the proofs then had to be redone and reapproved. So yeah, it was quite almost catastrophic, really, because
yeah,
a lot of work was done by that time. So it must have been very last minute for the first issue to make it out as Dragon's Claws rather than
yeah,
Teeth.
yeah. And I mean, back then, back in sort of 89, I mean, it's different now because if you come up with an idea for a project or a property, you can do a deep dive into the internet and you can find out whether it's going to clash with,
Mm,
any registered trademarks or that kind of thing. But back then, I mean, to do due diligence on that would be really difficult.
yeah, I
Plus the
mean,
fact that, and then something that was only two issues of a fairly obscure comic is not likely to give you any grief, but then you have to err on the side of caution, don't you?
yeah.
Just in case. So given then that you changed it to Dragon's Claws, did that affect the narrative, given that it was based on the idea of planting dragon's teeth?
Not really. I mean, that was
No.
the genesis of the title and something. It was going to be of the concept, but we never got to run with it long enough for that to come into play, that
Oh,
characters
right,
would
okay.
get killed and replaced, and there'd be a new lineup. You'd get gradually evolving lineup of supporting characters who'd be the new
Hmm.
teeth, the new sort of team members. So no, sadly, we never really got to the stage with it where that would have come into play.
Right. And how many issues was Dragon's Claws?
It was
10, you
it
said,
was
didn't you?
10, yeah.
10.
It was 10, and again, there's lots of reasons why sales didn't really go the way we hoped. And that was one of them, was that it was very, very early stages of any kind of direct market in America. The
Mm,
direct market being the ones that went to comic stores, and comic stores could order independent of the newsstand
yeah.
distribution. So it was very early days in that. I think, these days it would have been in Diamond previews, or, the equivalent, and it would have been picked up more in the US. And the
Mm,
other problem was, because it was US format, when it went to UK retailers like WH Smith, it slipped down behind all the slightly more A4 sized comics,
yeah.
and just wasn't as visible on the racking.
Mm, yeah.
So yeah, various things combined, and we only got 10 issues of Death's Head. Sleaze Brothers was only meant to be a 6-issue limited series. So
Right.
all of that came out. But again, I'm sure the plan was to do more Sleaze Brothers, introduce other, titles. But sadly, it was all a bit short-lived.
Mm, mm. And then that was prior to all the stuff that came later when Paul Neary was there, was it? They were doing a lot of Marvel proper Marvel books in the UK,
Yeah.
but that was a different outfit, wasn't it?
Yeah, that was a sort of second wave that happened, I suppose, in about 1992, something like that. Three,
Yeah.
somewhere around that. Yeah, and that was more or less spearheaded by Paul Neary, and relied much more heavily on Marvel superheroes cropping up in just about every issue of
Yeah.
every title.
Usually Wolverine.
Yeah. Yes, there were a lot of Wolverine guest
He got
stars.
around a bit, didn't he, on
Yes.
Wolverine? He was like an
Yeah.
imp for
Yeah. I mean, there's some great stuff in that second wave, but unfortunately the guest star thing kind of makes it look very gratuitously targeted at, that early 90s. Marvel was booming with all we've talked about before, the image, style,
Yeah,
influences, and big guns and bullet belts, and
yeah,
and that definitely was part of that second Marvel UK wave as well.
yeah. Yeah. But not as good as the original wave, with that just sense of originality
Mm.
is incredible, isn't it? With Dragon's Claws and Sleaze Brothers and Death's Head. It's like
Yeah.
just wonderful. Now you explain it. It's so British.
Yes.
It's
And
just yeah.
yeah, I mean, and we weren't beyond by the end of Death's Head's sort of 10-issue run, we'd started to realize that we probably needed to put Marvel guest stars in things. So, issue 9 has the Fantastic Four, and issue
Mm.
10 has the Iron Man of 2020 in it. So we were starting a bit late in the day to realize that we probably needed that edge of, we're part of this shared universe that Marvel US did so well.
Yeah, and I suppose if you do that, make that move to include um some of the US Marvel characters, then there's always the chance that they might notice that and then you know, pull the kind of UK Marvel characters into the Marvel US books and give them a bit more longevity. Because I
Yeah.
mean, Death's Head has done well in terms of maintaining some presence. I mean, it's
Mm.
a toy now. I mean, for goodness
Yes.
sake.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's several toys actually, but yeah, they've just brought out the nice full-sized Marvel Legends figure of Death's Head, and
Yeah.
it's great. It's great that he's still around, and yeah, I think some of that was, helped considerably by the fact that we drafted in Walter Simonson, big name
Mm.
artist, of course, who
famous for Thor. Yeah.
Well, yeah, and he really liked the character, and we got him to do a couple of covers. He did the cover to issue 9 with the Fantastic Four in it, and then he did the cover to the Body in Question, the graphic novel, and he did one of the covers for Strip, which
Mm.
which broke the Death's Head Body in Question graphic novel up into monthly installments. So yeah, he kind of got to grips with the character, and then asked if he could put him in Fantastic Four, and we just said, "Oh, absolutely,
Ah, brilliant. Yeah.
yes." So yes, from there, and what we're going to get onto talking about in a little bit is once I was working for Marvel US or outside of just Transformers, I did my little bit to get Death's Head in the sort of main Marvel universe.
Yeah. 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 Of course you did. Yes, it was your baby.
So I guess that's sort of covered that bit. But maybe we should go back to the end of episode 3 again, where we were talking about Jeff had just come on the Marvel Transformers book to do some issues, and
Mm.
and then Jose Delbo came back to do issue 67, by which point I'm pretty sure he was being lined up to draw Brute Force, something else I was writing for Marvel.
Right.
And we needed a new artist on the book, and I put your name in the frame, I believe. And why don't you take the story from there? Because you did some samples, I believe.
I did, yeah. So I don't know whether it was you that told me or whether well, you probably told me that they were going to get in touch. And so this thing came up where they were, there was a possibility of doing the US Transformers book, which was just like, what? Yeah, to work for Marvel US. I mean, that's absolutely, a dream come true to be able to do that. So they got in touch with me, and they said, they'd like me to have a go at that. So they asked me to do um, a double page spread of samples. I don't know whether they gave me a piece of script. I can only imagine they did something to work from. So they asked me to do this kind of test tryout kind of thing. But then there was a little kind of caveat thing or suggestion in a way. And I guess this was probably from Rob Tokar, who was the assistant editor at the time. Don Daly was the editor. Um, anyway, they said to me, we like what you've done on the UK book, but the American audience like their robots to look like robots. I was like, okay. So, obviously mine didn't occur to them that way. They looked a bit more organic. So, but they wanted them to look like robots. And if you look at, Jose Delbo's work or any of that kind of thing, it's cleaner. Although, I mean, Jeff was
Mm,
massively doing his own thing, wasn't he? But
yeah.
um, anyway, so I thought, okay, well, I'll take that on board because I want to make the most of this opportunity. So I did my 2-page sample thing, and definitely made them look a bit more like US Transformers comic robots, Transformers, whatever, cleaner lines, all that kind of stuff. And then just sort of very happily sent it in and just kind of waited, thinking, well, this is going to be amazing. And I can't remember how I heard. I can only assume it was a phone call. I mean, there was no email or anything, so I would imagine it was a phone call or possibly a letter faxed over. And they said, thank you for your 2-page sample, but it's not really what we're after. So sorry, but no.
Mm.
And I was like, what the hell?
Yeah. And
So that was it. That was my dream of getting into American comics, completely blown out of the water.
and
But I
I
don't
think
know. I don't know what you heard. What was your side of that
well,
story then?
well, from my side, I was very much pushing for you to be the next artist. As far as I was concerned, you were going to be drawing issue 68. And,
Hmm.
I thought this was going to be pretty much a done deal. But Don Daly, for whatever reason, had another artist in mind, this guy called Dwayne Turner.
Hmm.
And I don't know why, or whether Dwayne had expressed an interest, or Don just thought he'd be a good fit for the book. But he was the one that Don was sort of leaning towards, despite the fact that, I was far more keen that you came on board. But, Don was the editor. I didn't really have, a veto on this. All I could do was go, okay, well, let's see how he does with issue 68. So Dwayne drew issue 68, and you could kind of tell his heart wasn't in it, because Dwayne's a great artist. I'd seen other
Yeah.
stuff he'd done.
He
And
did some amazing Black Panther work, didn't he? Yeah, very
absolutely.
good.
And, so it just kind of just didn't sort of, it was like he didn't quite gel with the robot characters, and the issue was very human centric. It was even called the human factor. And it had this, it was the creation of this little sort of superhero team, Circuit Breaker, and then these new characters that were
Mm.
going to be, my little Transformers superhero team. And, it just kind of just lacked a bit. And I think everybody saw it. Even Don saw it wasn't quite what he was hoping for. So at
Mm.
that stage, once we saw the art, I just think I banged the drum again and said, I think we've just got to get Andrew drafted in for this. And, quite possibly Dwayne himself, I don't know, wasn't keen to do more. I
Mm.
don't think he was, champing at the bit to do issue 69. He was probably, yeah, that wasn't quite to my taste. And
Yeah.
so suddenly, we did need an artist again. And I think, at that point, Don kind of just caved. And, you know, I was always clear that you do, what you do, and it would all work out. And if I remember rightly, issue 69, which was your first,
Mm.
wasn't inked by Baskerville, was it? It was
No, it
somebody
wasn't.
else.
No. No, no.
And
I mean, they came back to me, said, "Oh, hi, it's us again," kind of thing. And they said, we've been thinking about this situation, and actually, we would like you to do the book." And I was like, "Okay, great." And I was like, "Well, okay, what about the style? You weren't sure." And they said, "You can do what you like."
yeah,
But it was almost in a like, we don't give a damn. Whatever. We're over all this. We don't want these conversations anymore. Just get on with it. So they said you can do what you like. So I can remember that first page of Transformers, and it opened with a like an external shot of the Ark, I think, going through
mm,
space. That was torture, that page. It was like it felt like the rest of my life depended on that one page, and that whole kind of blank page in front of you artist syndrome thing just was. I don't know how long it took me to do that first page. um yeah, I mean, obviously I eventually got through it, and then the second page seemed a lot easier, and I did my thing. I put
mm,
detail in, and it was a bit more organic and all that kind of stuff. So I thought I might as well go to town then and see what happens. But then, like you say, Stephen Baskerville hadn't been taken on as the inker. I think it was Harry Candelario
yeah,
had been. I don't know why they chose him, but nevertheless, he was an inker for Marvel, so they brought him in, and his approach was fine, but it pretty much took out all of the kind of detailing and the sort of organic nature of what I was putting back in. It had taken it all out. So it's almost like they said you can do what you like. I did what I like, and then they almost pressed the button to undo all of that to make it look like
yeah,
robots.
yes.
So
I mean, I
yeah,
have a feeling that was probably Don still trying to say, oh, we've got to make it look more like Jose's stuff or something like that.
yeah,
But, again, I'm pretty sure myself and maybe Rob just said, this is taking all the life out of it. And, you know, we should really just get, and of course, I knew that Basker's had already inked your work and seemed to work
Yeah.
well on your stuff. And I think by then Don may even have been moving off of the book and the book
Mm.
moving sort of solidly over to Rob. It seems likely by then that Don was going to take a step back anyway from it. So
Mm.
my feeling is probably there were lots of things involved, but I think once Rob was in charge, he was just, yep, do your thing, and
Yeah.
I think we all knew that it it wasn't a book that you could kind of afford to make slip ups on. We'd lose audience, and
Yeah.
it just had to be, go for it each time. You know, either the fans are going to be on board or they're not. But this sort of chopping with artists and styles wasn't going to help. So consistency was what I wanted, and I think Rob wanted, and that's what we got with you and Baskers.
Yeah. I mean, the that first issue I did, 69, prior to knowing who was going to ink it or whatever, I can remember, like I say, I really kind of labored over the first page, but the rest of the issue, there was a lot that I put into it. There was a lot of because it took place on the Ark. Those first kind of couple of issues were pretty much all on the Ark, weren't they? And I plotted out the the kind of geography of the parts of the Ark that I was going to use. I remember, draw if there was a particular room that they were in, I would do on a post-it note, just do a little plan view of where things were in that room. Oh, there's screens over here, there's a chair here, then whatever. Where's the door? Right, the door's just there. And then as the script went through and characters went out through the door, then I'd add another post-it note. Okay, right, there's a corridor along here, and just really plotted it out and blocked it all out like I do in storyboarding now. You very often just sort of block things out like that initially. Um, and then obviously we got to that wonderful final shot of issue 69 where we have the whole Mega Ratch thing.
Mm.
Um, and to draw that was a lot of fun. The way you described it, I mean, it was wonderful the way you described it, where um, you didn't. It wasn't just two characters that got merged together side by side or whatever. You suggested that you wanted to look like one had jumped through the other and got stuck halfway.
Mm.
Um, which I thought was a wonderful idea, but obviously I had to get the heads to mesh together somehow.
Yeah.
So I think they've got a shared eyeball or something. But
Mm.
so the heads are meshed together, but the rest of it definitely does look like one coming through the other, even to the point that I can't remember which way around it is, but there's the leg that's walked on, but there's a bit of leg that sticks out the back of, all that kind of thing. So I really enjoyed all that. And then, the inking was, yeah, that's a bit of a shame for my, debut. But then obviously Baskerville came on and did an amazing job. And I've had a lot of people say to me, somebody very, very recently said to me, who'd met me for the first time at a convention, they said that they absolutely loved issue 69 because the Mega Ratch character was just such an incredible way to end the book with like, what the hell is this? The
Yeah.
Transformers had not been like that before. I mean, we'd had zombie Starscream and things, um, but so they were actually blown away by that. But then they said when issue 70 came out and they opened the book and that first,
Mm.
splash page of Mega Ratch again, which was pretty much straight off the back of 69, but inked by Baskerville. They said it was like the same image, but like in 4K HD. It was just
Yeah.
suddenly it was like the TV show had become a movie for them. And that from then on, what Stephen was doing to it just dialed it up immensely. And then we really got into the nitty gritty of it.
Yeah, and everybody remembers the cover of issue 70. They still
Yeah.
come up they still come up and say, this deeply traumatized me as a child, this cover, And yeah, it was such a fun concept. And that bit about, I'd forgotten that description that one had more or less passed through the other. but that's based on
Mm.
the fact that the whole thing starts with a space bridge collapse and Ratchet piling into Megatron as he tries to escape through a space bridge portal, and the whole thing going
Yeah.
kablooey. And so that,
Mm.
I think, was the genesis of it's one person almost leaping through another.
Yeah. No, it was a wonderful description, and just gave me something to think about. That cover, yeah, that was a lot of fun to draw. I mean, a cover where you've got a cover where you've got full figures is, is great. But when you've got, I love those covers where you go in close on characters and you can get more sort of detail and nuance and feeling and all that kind of thing. And especially into those traumatized faces. But it's a very, very 80s cover, um, rather than even a 90s cover, because um, I think your description had been, close up with them, and you probably said holding up a piece of paper saying "help us" on it, kind of scrawled on it, um, which was good. And yes, that's very traumatic to see that's kind of scrawled on it. But the piece of paper that they're holding up is a piece of paper ripped out of a Filofax
I didn't
because it's
realize
got
that.
with the where the kind of punch holes are that you put it in. So for anyone who doesn't know, a Filofax was a very a very sort of late 80s thing. And it was like a very, very small ring binder that was divided up, and you could have paper in there just for writing notes, but you could have a diary, and you could have all sorts of, maps, all sorts of things. You could buy packets and collect different things to put in your Filofax. Um, and there was a character on EastEnders at the time that had one of these things, and I thought, I want one of these. This is amazing. I want one of these. So I searched high and low, and eventually got one. And I loved my Filofax. So it was probably sitting on my desk at the time. And when the description was like holding up a piece of paper, I just thought, yeah, I'm going to use my Filofax because I love my Filofax.
I'm pretty sure at this time I was doing those awful cover sketches that I used to do. But
They were wonderful, Simon.
but I mean, they generally got the idea across. But we did have a wonderful series of covers at this point. There's the issue 70 cover, then
Yeah,
71 is the surrender cover where Optimus Prime is kneeling, putting down the Autobot badge at Scorponok's leg and foot
yeah.
that's sort of extended. And I remember quite vividly badly drawing that one, but
Mm.
you reproduce the angle almost exactly on that one, which was great. It was like, oh wow, he's actually taken my layout there. So
Yeah.
and we just had I think really till the end we had such a good run of very memorable covers.
Mm. Well, I mean, that was your kind of role as the writer and the kind of, the visionary. You're thinking of the narrative, what's happening, and into the characters. To have those, I mean, I could, if I'd have just been given the task of doing a cover, do whatever you like, something that reflects the story, I'd have done whatever I did. But it was nice to have the cover description and the wonderful illustrations you did, come directly from the writer, because then it is going to key into exactly what the issue is about. Um, yeah, it was some good ones.
We had a good run together in that period, right up to issue 75, where I know Jeff had to jump in for the double-sized issue just because it would have probably destroyed you schedule-wise having to do an extra sized issue as well as the other stuff. But
Yeah.
other than that, it was uninterrupted from 69 through to the final issue,
Mm.
and it gave us a real chance, I think, to just develop our own kind of story momentum about it. It felt like 69 to 80 was very much its own section of the Transformers story.
Yeah, I think so. And it was a nice jumping on point for me, because it was that sort of quiet moment on the arc, and then everything sort of grew from there. So yeah, it was a good one, definitely.
Yeah. And I suppose, I suppose we're going to have to wrap this up at some point soonish. So
Yeah.
really that was your door opener for Marvel US. I mean, I'd been in a little longer, and I think
Mm.
by this point, like I say, Brute Force was something I was going on to do as well as Transformers at the time. And Brute
Mm.
Force came out of, it was developed by a guy whose name I can't remember now, Charles something. And he'd brought it to Marvel, and Marvel thought this was a great idea to do a comic that would basically be the launch platform for a toy company to come in and say, we'll make the action figures, almost the
Right.
inverse of G.I. Joe and Transformers, where it had been action figures into comic. This was supposed to be comic into action figures, and Brute Force, which I'll talk a little bit more about next time, was, that was the embryo idea. And Bob Budiansky was the editor of Marvel's special projects. So he
Mm-hmm.
would do the things, slightly outside of the more mainstream books. And Brute Force was, because it was his baby, he just turned around to me and said, would you like to write this? And I thought, animals in exoskeletons. It's not exactly blowing my skirt up, but at the time, and I'm sure like you, we were both just on the lookout for anything that, might be termed a proper Marvel universe book.
I'm sure. I thought you were going to say at that point. I thought you were going to say, and at the time, like you, I'm sure we used to wear skirts, which is
Yeah,
like,
yeah. Well, that's possibly where we end
I
this
thought
one then.
I thought you weren't going to give that one away. Yeah, on that
Yes.
bombshell. Yeah.
Anyway, yes. So possibly that's where we can wrap this, unless you want to jump in with any last thoughts on your Transformers run.
No, I mean, over time, obviously, it would be nice to get into specific little things that happened during that run, story details, little Easter eggs,
Hmm.
whatever. There's a lot of stuff in there, but no, that's a good way to kind of speed through how we got there and how long that lasted and what came next. But yeah, who knows what we'll talk about next week, Simon?
Yeah, possibly none of these things.
No, we'll talk about skirts.
Well, I'm sure that's what our fans want to know.
I'm sure they don't. Good.
Okay.
All
Well,
right.
yeah.
Have a good 2 weeks, everybody, and we'll catch you next time. It's goodbye from me.
And it's goodbye from him.
Thank you for listening to The Rest is Giant Robots. If you enjoyed what you heard, please consider subscribing for more and maybe share with like-minded friends. This has been a Wildfur production.